The last experiment. In a secret facility, buried in the uncharted depths of the Earth, a group of elite scientists embarked on humanity's most ambitious project, mastering the flow of time. They dubbed it the last experiment. Armed with advanced knowledge and futuristic technology, they believed they were on the brink of a new dawn for humanity. The excitement was palpable as they approached the moment of activating the time machine. On the day of the experiment, the tension was razor-sharp. Activating the device, a blinding light filled the room, followed by a deafening silence. For an instant, it seemed they had succeeded. But then, the unthinkable happened. A temporal rift opened, tearing through the fabric of reality. At first, there were only minor lapses, moments repeating or vanishing. But soon, chaos ensued. The team of scientists watched, horrified, as their achievement turned into catastrophe. What was meant to be a milestone in the history of science quickly became a nightmare. The rift, initially no larger than a beam of light, began to expand, swallowing objects, data, and equipment. The minor temporal lapses that seemed harmless at first now caused visible distortions, as if the reality around the rift was liquefying, defying all laws of physics known to man. Amid the chaos, reports of apparitions and disappearances began to emerge. Objects from other eras appeared and vanished without explanation, from relics of ancient civilizations to items from a distant future. The scientists, in a desperate effort, tried to comprehend and control the situation, but each attempt to close the rift only seemed to worsen things. The reality around the laboratory became unstable, with time flowing erratically, accelerating, decelerating, or even reversing in brief moments. The situation reached a critical point when the first creatures began to emerge from the rift. First, small beings, almost imperceptible, but soon after, entities of sizes and shapes that defied imagination. The team realized, with terror, that they were dealing with the consequences of time travel, but had also opened portals to unknown dimensions. The experiment, conceived to be the pinnacle of human advancement, had become an existential threat, with the potential to unravel the very fabric of reality. The first creatures to emerge from the rift were seen as wonders, beings from past eras that science only knew through fossils. However, admiration quickly turned into terror. It was not just beings from the past that the rift brought. Creatures from unknown dimensions and alternative realities began to infiltrate our world. Predators of unimaginable appearances, with insatiable hungers, loosed in a world that was unprepared for them. The team of scientists, realizing the magnitude of their error, worked frantically to find a solution. The temporal rift challenged human comprehension, but it began to unravel the very essence of reality. Histories altered, loved ones disappeared without a trace, and the world as we knew it began to disintegrate. Every experiment, every calculation, was a race against time, not just figuratively, but literally, as the rift seemed to consume time itself around it. Facing this impending catastrophe, the scientists delved into ancient texts and theories, looking for any clue that could lead to a solution. Some began to question the ethics of their experiments, reflecting on the consequences of their actions not just for themselves, but for the entirety of human and non-human existence. The rift had become a dark mirror, reflecting the flaws and arrogance of humanity in believing it could control forces so far beyond its comprehension. The search for answers also became a journey of introspection, where each scientist faced the consequences of their own curiosity and unchecked ambition. As they struggled to find a solution, strange and terrifying events became common. The laboratory, once a sanctuary of science, now seemed a meeting point for temporal anomalies and creatures of nightmares. Clocks spun wildly, alternating between the past and the future in a matter of seconds. Shadows moved independently of their sources, and bodiless voices whispered words from eras long forgotten. The team knew that if they could not repair the rift, they would not only lose their homes and loved ones but could provoke the total collapse of reality, erasing everything humanity had been and could ever be. Among the scientists was Dr. Elena Vostok, a theoretical physicist who realized that the key to closing the rift might lie in events of the past and future. She proposed a risky mission, to travel through the rift to correct the events that led to its creation. Armed with a prototype temporal suit, Elena stepped into the unknown, not knowing whether she could return. Her determination was fueled by guilt and the responsibility she felt not just as part of the team that had unleashed this catastrophe, but also as someone who might hold the key to reversing the chaos. Before her departure, Elena spent days analyzing the data, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when reality began to fracture. With the help of her colleagues, she mapped a series of critical events along the timeline that needed to be adjusted or avoided. The plan was uncertain and fraught with dangers, as any alteration in the past could have unpredictable consequences, potentially erasing their own existence or creating an even more distorted reality. Activating the temporal suit, Elena was enveloped in a blinding light and an overwhelming sensation of vertigo. When the light dissipated, she found herself in a drastically different world, witnessing the direct effects of her intervention. Each step was a delicate balance between doing what was necessary to repair the rift and avoiding further disturbance to the fabric of reality. She faced challenges that tested not just her scientific knowledge, but also her courage and morality, as the line between right and wrong became increasingly blurred. On her journey, Elena encountered versions of herself and her colleagues, some aiding in her mission, others trying to stop her, believing her actions could lead to the end of everything they knew. Each encounter left Elena more convinced of the importance of her mission, but also more aware of the complexities and paradoxes of time travel. With each adjustment to the timeline, she felt the rift stabilizing, but at the same time, realized that the path back to the reality she had left might no longer exist. This realization did not deter her. On the contrary, it strengthened her resolve to fix what had been broken, regardless of the cost to herself. Elena's journey was marked by shocking revelations. She witnessed civilizations rise and fall through the ages, saw worlds where humanity never existed, and faced the consequences of her colleagues' actions in alternative realities. Each step brought her closer to understanding that the experiment had affected not just the fabric of space-time but also the moral lines that humanity should never cross. Upon returning, laden with the knowledge necessary to close the rift, Elena found the laboratory in ruins, taken over by creatures beyond imagination. With reality unraveling around her, she fought to reach the time device, now an island amidst a sea of chaos. In the final moment, with the fate of reality hanging in the balance, Elena activated the device, reversing the experiment. A blast of white light engulfed everything. She awoke in a world where the last experiment had never happened. However, while the reality around her seemed normal, Elena carried with her the memories of a world that had challenged time. The ultimate terror was not just what they had faced but the realization that, somewhere in the depths of the unknown, the rift still existed, a silent reminder of the boundaries humanity should never again cross. As days passed, Elena began to notice that things were not as normal as they appeared. Minor lapses and discrepancies in reality became more frequent. Clocks displayed impossible hours. People she knew well did not recognize her or remembered events that had never occurred. It was as if the very fabric of existence was unraveling, with fragments of other realities and times intertwining with hers. Elena attempted to alert her colleagues about what was happening, but to her surprise, the laboratory where the experiment had been conducted no longer existed. In its place was only an empty lot, as if the institution had never been built. Her fellow scientists, with whom she had shared so many critical moments, now led completely different lives, with no memory of the experiment or of Elena. She was alone in her fight, a stranger in a world that was simultaneously familiar and terrifyingly alien. The impact of time on Elena became more visible and horrifying. She began to experience involuntary temporal jumps, finding herself in random moments and places without warning. One moment, she was in her kitchen making coffee. The next, she found herself in an unknown city, centuries in the past, or even in a dystopian future where civilization had fallen. Each jump left her more disoriented and fearful of what she would find next. The climax of her terror occurred when Elena found herself in a reality where humanity had been almost entirely eradicated by grotesque creatures that had emerged from the rift she attempted to close. In this world, the sky was perpetually covered by stormy clouds, and the cities in ruins were dominated by beings that seemed ripped from the darkest nightmares. Elena realized, horrified, that her attempts to correct the timeline had, in fact, contributed to the creation of an even more terrible reality. Now, trapped in this apocalyptic world, she faced the reality that her actions had irreversibly altered the course of human history, leaving her in a temporal limbo where the hope of a return to her original world or a normal existence was just a distant memory, an echo of a time that might have never truly existed. In her desolation, Elena wandered the ruins of civilization, tormented by guilt and regret. Each step was a reminder of her failure, each deformed phase she encountered, a silent judgment of her choices. She had sought to master time, but instead, she had become its prisoner, condemned to wander through a shattered world, a shadow among shadows. The cruel irony of her fate was the realization that, in her attempt to save reality, Elena had become the architect of its destruction. The last experiment, conceived to be the pinnacle of human achievement, had become humanity's epitaph, inscribed on the ruins of a time that would never be the same again. In a universe where the rift still mocked, open and insatiable, Elena faced the most terrifying truth of all. There was no escape, no redemption, only the eternity of a mistake that would echo forever in the relentless depths of time. Dare to venture into the unknown. Join us on a journey where shadows whisper and secrets lurk. Subscribe now and ring the bell to summon fresh mysteries directly to your screen every few days. Ignore this call, and be warned, an eternal curse awaits those who wander in the dark, unguided. Do you have the courage to face the unknown? Your adventure begins with a click. Welcome to the realm where every notification brings you closer to the abyss. Subscribe, if you dare.